on this very critical issue, but I just want to say a few things, more than some of the students may know, but certainly more than many of the parents know. This has been an issue, vaping, that the board has been very concerned about for a couple of years. We've changed all our policies, we've changed all our regulations, because while we have to be supportive of students in these moments, we also have to, as I like to say, put up some pretty definite guardrails. We've also instituted, with the thanks of ADAP, all rising ninth graders and families who were required to attend the program at the beginning of the school year, where we dealt with some of these issues. As I walked in, one of the parents said we should require this work. Districts all over the country grapple with what can be required. So it was a very big step in Weston with the rising ninth graders, and this is an issue, as we're going to learn, is deep in the middle school. But at least to take that step in Weston to say, as you come into the high school, you're required with your families to come to a session to talk through a range of issues and topics. And we're constantly learning. We borrowed that, thanks to ADAP, from Trumbull. So we're constantly trying to look for examples. I'm going to be a little personal. I was out for 3 weeks, double pneumonia, hospitalized for a week. I spent my 60th birthday in the hospital. You would be amazed how many nurses, how many doctors came to me, and what did they ask me? Was I vaping? So that was a very kind of personal moment to say how serious this has become. That in many ways, as I said, it sort of snuck up on us. It should not have snuck up on us, but it has. Last year, in final comment, we have great student leadership in Weston, and we have 2 non-voting students on the board. And last year, one of the students, I'll leave his name out of it, wonderful leader, off in college now, was very direct with the board, very direct with Ms. Wolak, and it's the kind of leadership I like to see, to say you're working on vaping, but you got to connect at even a better level with us. And here's the tough reality, he said. For about half his friends who may be vaping, they got into it just to try something. But a whole bunch of others tried and then are now addicted. And so he said, you've got to both understand how you support us as students not to try things, because all of us have been adolescents, we're raising adolescents. The normal thing with adolescents is, let me try something. But often then, when you try it, for sadly a whole number of students, you then are stuck. So I'm glad we're on this topic. We want to meet more about it, work more on it. And I thank ADAP, I thank the Weston Coalition for your work on this, and we will keep being very open and honest in Weston about what we have to do on these issues to be of support. Last thing I'll say is, next week we have a double session on safety and security, and then we're wrapping this little seminar series, if you've seen the notice, thanks to Laura for organizing this, on how we provide emotional support for students, because a lot of that vaping decision ties back sometimes to, I'm experimenting because I'm trying to help myself with an emotional issue. So we're going to go full circle with this work. So thank you.
Thanks. All right. So my name's Laura Cleary. I'm the director of Weston Youth Service. I'll be really brief. So I want to just say, yeah, this is organized with the Weston Coalition, which if you want to know more about that, that's kind of a group, a coalition of lots of different organizations and groups in Weston that work to support youth and families. And we come together every few months just to collaborate, support each other, hear what everyone's doing. That's how we came up with the idea of creating this as a 3-part series, with vaping as the first one. But I want to thank ADAP of Weston, myself, Weston Youth Services, and Weston High School PTO for really sponsoring this vaping program. And if you'd asked us maybe like in the middle of the summer whether we were going to have another vaping program, we probably would have said no, because we had a vaping program last year, and the middle school had a vaping speaker, and the school resource officers talk to the kids about vaping, and they get vaping in health, and we might have said, okay, I think that's enough. But as you know, and as Dr. McCursey talked about, and Tricia Dow is going to talk about, there's been some escalating concerns, right, with all the illness and even some deaths related to vaping, where even the CDC is saying, everybody should stop vaping while we figure this out, even adults. So that's why we thought it was so important to have Tricia come. And Tricia Dale's worked for the Yale School of Medicine since 2001, doing alcohol and tobacco research. More recently, is it 2013, if I'm remembering?
This is our 7th year, so
yeah, doing focused on e-cigarettes and focused on youth. And they're really uniquely doing that work to look at e-cigarette use in youth. So we're excited to have her here, just to really kind of give us the facts and the information that can help everybody make decisions, especially in this time where everyone's a little bit scared about what's happening with vaping. I just want to mention that thanks to you students who are here, I know you have a busy day, and we appreciate you coming. We are doing the raffle of 2 Peters Weston Market gift cards, just to say thank you, because we think it's so important that you're here. So if you didn't get a raffle, ticket, raise your hand, we'll get one to you, and we will be wrapping this up by 8. So you can make sure, we'll be sure to do the raffle by like maybe 10 of 8. I know one of you has to leave at 10 of. So we'll stay for Q&A, but we'll make sure we wrap up at 8. You can leave if you need to. So I'm gonna turn it over to Trisha now.
Thank you very much. All right. First, I wanted to thank everybody for coming because this is a pretty good turnout for parents, students. It's not often I've been asked to come to a lot of places to talk to parents, and I show up and there's maybe a half a dozen parents because parents don't think this affects their child. Unfortunately, it affects every child. When you look at the statistics, you'll realize why. And Laura has been a tremendous advocate for me coming here. She has all but begged in person for me to please drive all the way to Weston to talk. So thank you for being persistent for them because they are here to hear. So this is the group that I work for. We are the only people in the country who do research with teens and vaping. So we do have a very unique position that we're in. There's a lot of other people that actually research vaping, but we are the only people who research it with teens. So everything that I present to you tonight is based on real data that we've collected. This is all published information as well. We are on our second 5-year grant, 2 years into it, each $20 million from the National Institute of Health to research this device and these electronic nicotine delivery systems. So this is from the 2018 Monitoring the Future survey. This is with secondary, both private and public secondary schools in the country. This has not been released to the schools yet, but this is the latest data. 1 in 4 of our high school seniors is reporting that they've vaped in the past 30 days. 1 in 5 of our 10th graders, and 9% of our 8th graders. That's past 30 day, that's not ever. This is just to give you a timeline. So from 2017 to 2018, we saw the largest increase in adolescent substance abuse that we've seen in 43 years. This is with high school students, so these are the e-cigarettes, and this is the combustible cigarette. This is with middle schools from 2017 to 2018. This is where, for some reason, we had a nice little drop and then popped right back up again. This is data that we've collected on teens using vaping devices. This is past year. And then over here we have what teens say they're vaping. Now, just as a little side note, this part here says just flavoring. A survey that we do in 9 of the Connecticut high schools shows us that 1/3 of the kids that are using the Juul don't know that it always contains nicotine. So they could be falling in this just flavoring category. And then based on the surveys that we've recently conducted, our youth are saying almost half of them have tried it, and past 30 days, we have almost 1/3 of them. So this is middle school and high school. So just to get everybody on the same page, because when I talk about this further, you'll understand why I need to get everybody on the same page. It doesn't matter what the device looks like. They all are made up of the same basic components. So they all have a rechargeable battery. They have a pod or a cartridge that holds the e-liquid or e-juice. And there's an atomizer that heats up the liquid, and a mouthpiece where you inhale from. So the e-cigarettes evolved tremendously over time. The first generation e-cigarettes were called Cigalites because they looked just like a cigarette. They came in 1 flavor, tobacco, 1 dose of nicotine, You used them until there was no more nicotine coming out, then you threw it out and you had to buy a new one, very similar to a pack of cigarettes. Then the second generation are called vape pens or tank style devices. These now, he's traveling. These now introduce rechargeable batteries, so you didn't have to throw the device out anymore. It introduced the different colors, so now you can personalize your device. You can choose from different levels of nicotine, and you can choose different flavors. The third generation are mods and mechanical mods. These are the largest, most powerful devices out there. They're about the size of a deck of cards. These you control the temperature at which you heat the liquid, and you can control the power at which the liquid is heated. These are not what you're seeing in high schools, because these make a very large cloud of aerosol. So these are what you see. I don't know if you've ever been, I'm sure you have, been behind a car that you think is on fire because this huge cloud comes out of the window. That's because they're using a mod. These are used in vape contests. There are huge conventions that take up the entire XL Center with just people who use these devices and do vape tricks. So these are very popular, more so with adults. And then the fourth generation are the pod style devices, and that's where Juul and Soren fall in. Those are our top two in that category. You'll hear me talk a lot about Juul. Basically, 75% of the kids that are using these devices are using the Juul. It looks like this here, however, they do sell skins, so kids can personalize it, so it doesn't have to look like this. Okay, so what's in an e-liquid or an e-juice? Every single e-liquid out there is made up of 5 basic components. The base for every single liquid is made up of propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. So 100% of the base is comprised of these two things. Propylene glycol provides a throat hit. So something cigarette smokers say they like about smoking cigarettes is the feeling they get in the back of their throat. Propylene glycol does that for e-cigarettes. Vegetable glycerin comes from vegetable oil, coconut oil, so it's a much thicker substance. That provides the cloud. So something like the mod that I was talking about has a much higher ratio of vegetable glycerin to propylene glycol because they want you to see the cloud. Something like these pod style devices do not want you to see the cloud, so they have much lower amount of vegetable glycerin and a higher amount of propylene glycol. These two have been FDA approved to add to foods because they add a semi-sweet aftertaste. They have never been FDA approved for constant inhalation, and we'll get into that why shortly. On a package, those are referred to as PG and VG, and you'll see 50-50, 70-30, 80-20, some kind of ratio, but those are the most popular. And there are other chemicals in these liquids. The most concerning other chemical that we've found is ethanol, fancy name for alcohol. Depending on how much alcohol is in the e-liquid, it can be toxic to the brain. Then there's nicotine and flavors. Over 15,000 flavors on the market right now. So I want to just go over what the difference is between the newest generation devices and these older generation. The main difference is the type of nicotine that's used. Pod style devices use something called nicotine salt or salt-based nicotine. Older generation devices use something called free-base nicotine. Free-base nicotine is nicotine in its purest form. Salt-based nicotine is free-base nicotine with salt added. And the reason they add salt to nicotine is nicotine by itself is a very harsh, irritating chemical. So once you get past 16, 18 milligrams of nicotine, it starts to become very uncomfortable to vape. So they'll switch over to salt-based nicotine. And what salt-based nicotine does is it adds salt or benzoic acid to free-base nicotine. Makes it much more smooth and tolerable, and you can vape extremely high levels of nicotine without even feeling it. Unfortunately, when you have benzoic acid and you have heat, which the atomizer in these devices creates, and you have vitamin C, which a lot of the e-liquids have, you create a chemical called benzene. That's a known cancer-causing chemical. So we know that is being created from these salt-based nicotines. We also know from a recent study that someone in our tobacco center has just published that Juul had two chemicals that went into their device, which by themselves relatively safe. When you put these chemicals together, they create new chemicals. So as you know, with anything in chemistry, these two things by themselves are one thing. There's a game on the iPhone. There's an app that you can mix all of these chemicals. I don't remember what it's called now. The kids are smiling, so I know they know what it's called. Where you mix these different things together and then they make something new. Well, that's what happened with the Juul. You mix these two chemicals together and now they've created a new chemical that is not as safe. Salt-based nicotine, 59 milligrams of nicotine. We don't know another tobacco product on the market that has that much nicotine in it. It's equivalent to 200 puffs, 1 pack of cigarettes. Our research study, the kids that participate in it who are current vapers, tell us that they're going through a pod in 1 to 2 days. That's the equivalent of a half a pack of cigarettes to a pack of cigarettes a day for someone who's never touched a cigarette before. 59 milligrams on the package that Juul provides, and now other companies are following suit. It's referred to as 5% strength. We asked the kids on our survey, do you think 5% strength is a lot? Of course not. I don't think 5% sounds like a lot. 5% strength of that little tiny pot. That's easier to say than 59 milligrams of nicotine. A lot more deceiving as well. Juul recently came out with a 3% strength as well. Still 36 milligrams of nicotine. Older generation devices, anywhere from 0 to 36. Like I said, once you get to 18, I rarely hear of anybody vaping the older generation free-base nicotine. So, this is a very short list of the many, many chemicals that make up the different flavored e-liquids. The 3 that are highlighted create a buttery, creamy texture. So butterscotch, creme brulee, caramel, those all have at least one of these chemicals. Even flavors like strawberry or blueberry, which don't sound creamy, has at least one of these chemicals. 90% of the 15,000 flavors have at least one of these chemicals in it. These are known toxins, and all of these chemicals cause inflammation, swelling of your lung tissues. Cinnamaldehyde, cinnamon bun, red hot, fireball, comes with a warning on the bottle. Kids aren't reading the warning on the bottle, but the warning on the bottle says you can't use it in a plastic pot or a plastic cartridge because it's a corrosive. You just put it in a glass pot or cartridge, but go ahead and vape it. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And then, they just get more interesting as we go along. And when somebody sees strawberry e-liquid, they like to think, at least the kids like to think, it's just crushed up strawberries. There's nothing strawberry in strawberry e-liquid. It's a bunch of chemicals that you mix together, makes it smell like strawberry, makes it taste like strawberry. So what's the big deal about nicotine? For so many years we've talked about tobacco, cigarettes, tobacco. We've never ever talked to kids about nicotine. They have no idea what nicotine does. Nicotine is a stimulant and it's highly addictive. The adolescent brain is changing until they're 25 years old. Certain things in the adolescent brain that are changed cannot be changed back. So nicotine directly affects learning, memory, and attention. Once you rewire those circuits with nicotine, they do not get rewired back. So, once you're addicted to nicotine and it starts to alter your attention, your memory, your learning, those things will never change back to where they were before you were addicted to nicotine. The other thing that's affected is the pleasure center. So what happens when you inhale is it goes through your lungs to your brain, to the pleasure center of your brain, releases a chemical called dopamine. Gives you a temporary feeling of pleasure. That's what kids like. They don't know the rest of the stuff that goes with it. The problem is our brains naturally produce dopamine. So when they win a game against their arch rivals, or it's the last day of school, they just got out for summer vacation, those natural feelings of happiness is our body's natural production of dopamine. When you vape on a regular basis, our brains are very efficient, and they say, something else is coming on board, releasing this chemical. There's no reason for me to keep producing as much of this chemical as I do. So it slowly cuts back on the amount that it makes. The more you vape, the more it cuts back. Well, now, you decide that you don't want to vape anymore, your level of dopamine that your brain is making is way down here, and you don't feel the way that you used to anymore. The things that used to make you happy aren't making you happy anymore. That's an addiction, and like I tell the kids when I go into the schools, nobody ever wakes up in the morning and says, today's the day I want to get addicted. It never happens that way. People that are cigarette smokers never think they're addicted. They can quit whenever they want until they have to try. Kids usually try it for their first time, peer pressure, probably don't even like it. Then they try it again, they maybe like it a little bit more, and then they've had a really bad day, so they'll vape again. And then tomorrow maybe, I think it's going to be a bad day, so they'll vape before school, until they're not making that decision anymore on their own, because their brain is not going to let them go on with their day without starting it with nicotine.
Is that reversible, or is that permanent?
So as far as the dopamine receptors go, over time, and usually with help, a nicotine addiction is very, very difficult to stop on your own, but it can be reversed. It does take time. Usually it's introducing more things that make you happy, or things that used to make you happy, things you enjoy doing, and that will build up on those dopamine receptors. Sometimes it takes medication, which will help increase those dopamine receptors. Unfortunately, your bodies get dependent on those things, so it can't produce it on your own after that. It takes a lot of, rethinking things, therapy, and replanning how you do things to tell that you can still enjoy things without nicotine. So the other big myth that's out there, it's just water vapor. What's the big deal? It's actually not a water vapor at all, it's an aerosol. So water vapor evaporates. Aerosols are made up of tiny microscopic particles that remain suspended in the air until gravity pulls them down. You can't have something that's made of vegetable oil derivatives and coconut oil and expect that it's going to dissolve. It doesn't. So these larger particles are not easily absorbed by our lungs. So they will attach to the tissues of your lungs. The more you vape, the more particles are on the tissues of your lungs and are not getting absorbed. We don't know what to do in the medical field when lungs are coated with oil. This goes for e-liquids, this goes for THC oil. It has oil. I've had health teachers say, well, what about essential oils? It's an oil. You can't inhale oil, and that's why these have never been FDA approved to inhale constantly. Because as you know in the news, all these things that are causing inflammation of our lung tissue are adding up, and that's why when he was in the hospital with pneumonia, that's mandatory now. Anybody who goes in with any respiratory issues, it has to be reported to the CDC whether or not they've vaped in the past 90 days. These cases that are in the news, the kids like to fluff it off and say, those are just all THC users, that it's black market. we know that everybody that's fallen ill, the one common thing is they've all vaped in the past 90 days. Some of these symptoms start in a couple days, some are weeks, some are months, so that's not consistent with anybody. Although many of them were THC users, most of those THC users add nicotine to their THC. So we don't know what's doing it, and neither does the CDC. They're saying stop using everything because we don't know what's causing this. The biopsies that they're doing, there's an oily film on the lungs. Again, they're using alcohol massage to get this oil off. I'm pretty certain you can't do that on a living person. And I know the kids like to challenge the fact that I say that these are oil-based. So I usually say, okay, put a little on a shelf, somewhere that somebody smaller isn't going to get to it. And go check that shelf in a week, check it in 2 weeks, and tell me if it evaporates. If it doesn't evaporate in all that air, it's not going to evaporate on your lungs. And they sell cleaners for car windshields because that residue does not come off with Windex. There's a special cleaner that has to be used to get that off of the windshield. So when we talk about the health effects on others, we know about secondhand smoke, we know that there's secondhand vape. So you walk into a bathroom after somebody else has vaped, now you're inhaling those same particles that they've just exhaled. So some of the parts of the body, other than the brain, that are affected by nicotine, especially adolescents, increased blood clotting tendencies, can cause bronchospasms in your lungs. Vegetable glycerin, too much vegetable glycerin in your body converts to lactic acid. And lactic acid causes muscle pains, cramps, aches, gastrointestinal issues. So not only just dry mouth, because it's a salt-based nicotine and does just like salty foods would do, too much pizza, chips, french fries, makes you thirsty. Salt-based nicotine does the same thing. But it also affects the muscle on the top of your stomach. So that muscle is intended to keep the acids that break down your food down in your stomach. Well, when you have too much nicotine on board, it relaxes that muscle, lets the acids come up, so it causes a lot of heartburn. Also, the amount of nicotine that's in these devices causes lightheadedness, headaches, when they try to stop, very similar to cigarette smoking, dizziness, irritability, can cause your heart to race. So what happens when you vape that much nicotine? It causes an adrenaline rush. So it causes like a fight or flight response. This is why we think so many athletes think this is a great idea to do. Instead of drinking these energy drinks on the buses, now they're vaping on the bus so they have extra energy during their games. Unfortunately, it's affecting so many other parts of your body besides your heart that it's just not worth it. We also know that it is affecting your pancreas. So your pancreas is what's in charge of producing insulin. Insulin keeps your blood sugar levels where they're supposed to be, so the rest of our organs function the way they're supposed to. When you vape on a regular basis, the amount of insulin that your pancreas produces is decreased. So now your blood sugar levels are not where they're supposed to be. Again, could cause the dizziness. And you're not taking anything to make that blood sugar where it's supposed to be. We've not seen yet what it's going to do with humans. We've seen it with adolescent animals. So we can only speculate, and that's what we have to do oftentimes. So these symptoms that are happening in the news right now, we've seen in adolescent animals. We had no idea this was going to happen this fast with humans. So these are just some of the concerns. So here you see about the metals, and I didn't talk about metals yet. What happens is when these devices get heated up, that atomizer is a coil, and the coil breaks down, and now you're inhaling nickel, lead, and chromium. Those are all parts that make up the coil. You're at a 71% higher risk of a stroke, 59% higher risk of heart attack or angina, chest pain, 40% higher risk of heart disease, and a higher risk of seizures. So, is there a gateway effect? The surveys that we do in the high schools are longitudinal surveys. We go in every single year and ask the same kids the same questions. So we know, based on the survey data, that 1 in 6 kids who start out vaping will eventually turn to combustible cigarettes. Because when you're addicted to nicotine, cigarettes will always be easier to get. So even though we've talked till we were blue in the face and we finally made a difference as far as cigarette smoking is concerned, if you asked an athlete 5 years ago, would you ever smoke a cigarette? They would say, absolutely not. Well, when you're addicted to nicotine, especially if something happens with these e-cigarettes, you don't have a choice. You will turn to the next easiest form of nicotine, which unfortunately is cigarettes. So, other substances that are very prevalent, starting in the middle schools up, and when I talk about these in the schools, this has no boundaries. I don't care if you are the most affluent town or you're an inner city school, whether you're an all-boys school or a mixed crowd, if you're a private school or a public school, it is everywhere. So the public schools have it a little more difficult, or the co-ed schools, because these smells that are in the hallway, in the bathroom, these girls always smell very fruity with all the bath and body products out there. All-boys school, they don't have that fruity smell. Trust me, my kids are in an all-boys school and there's nothing fruity about the way they smell. They're not allowed to chew gum. They're not allowed to have candy. And they don't smell fruity. But yet, it's still a problem there. So it doesn't matter where they are. This is a problem, and I'm going to talk about how it got so bad shortly. But vaping marijuana, THC oil, is a very big issue. We know that marijuana has medicinal purposes. We don't even know the medicinal purposes for THC oil. Again, it's an oil base. We can't inhale oil. And it's a very immediate and intense response that your body has to it. Very hard to regulate how much you're getting. And still has all of those inflammation properties in these devices. Dabbing. This is one of the newest, most scary things out there. Very common, unfortunately, in the high schools. The device looks very similar that they're using in the high schools to this one over here. This is a rig, but this device here is a dab pen. This uses wax. It's free-base marijuana. You don't smell anything. Very scary what happens with this. So a combustible marijuana joint, 15% of THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. THC oil has 60% of that psychoactive ingredient. The dab wax has 90% concentrate. That's free-base marijuana. These are some of the side effects from the dab wax. Rapid heartbeat, blackouts, feeling like some bugs are crawling under your skin, loss of consciousness, and the most common of these psychotic symptoms, paranoia and hallucinations. You as parents don't hear this regularly in the news because schools don't like to be publicized by having these things, in the news that it happened at their school. This is almost weekly that schools are sending 6 or more kids to the emergency room. Again, every kind of school is doing it. Yesterday I had to present to a bunch of teachers, and they said we just sent a bunch of kids just last week. It's happening everywhere. I hear more often because they're calling me to ask if I can help them in any way. So So we used to think that marijuana was not something that you built up a tolerance to. Well, now there are more studies that are proving wrong. You need to have much more of the same substance to feel the way that you used to. That's a tolerance, which would explain why you have to go from 15% concentrate to close to 90% concentrate. So these companies are spending close to $200 million a year advertising to our kids. Everything on social media paints a very pretty picture of this. Kids hear healthy alternative, they really just hear healthy. That was supposed to be a healthy alternative to smoking, and we know that they weren't smoking cigarettes before. So that wasn't the option. They watch these videos online. It shows them these big glass jars filled with cotton, one that's infused with e-cigarette aerosol, the other's infused with cigarette smoke. They do a time-lapse video, and the one from cigarette smoke is black. The other's just wet, but still white. See, kids, it's healthier. All that proves is e-cigarettes don't have tar. That's what turns the cotton black. They like the kids to think that's just water on the wet cotton. That's like an oily residue. But they don't tell the kids that. The kids are not looking at FDA websites. They're not looking at the CDC websites. There's no way that they're going to get this information. It's just not out there for them. They know that there's no long-term health effects. Unfortunately, we don't even know all the long-term health effects. The Juul was only invented in 2014. Didn't hit the market till late 2015. We're only 4 years in with this, and it's already created this mess. The kids know it tastes good, it smells good, they like the way they feel, and they don't know of any long-term health effects. They're trying to be independent, they're trying to make their own decisions. Now here comes a new device that's very sleek, very novel. So of course they're going to want to do it. And the only way that we're going to make a difference is to educate them on what this really is and not that pretty picture that's painted in social media. When I go into the schools, I try and talk to the kids about having a plan. With the statistics that I showed you, it's not if they're ever going to be offered a device, it's when. They will be offered a device at some point. They need to start coming up with a plan on how they're going to deal with it. I had a mom call me. Her daughter was a freshman on a varsity tennis team. They're on the bus on the way to a tennis match. It's a big deal to be a freshman on a varsity team. Seniors are all vaping on the bus. They offer it to her daughter. That's a hard situation for an adult to be faced with, let alone a teenager who's trying to fit in. So I tell the kids, just think of something. I don't usually condone stretching the truth, but with this, sometimes you have to. I've tried it before. I don't like the way it feels. I have asthma. I know someone who got very sick from it. I don't want to try something. It's better to have a plan and not need it than not have a plan and need it. I have 2 boys that are both in high school. One's a sophomore, one's a junior. Depending on your personality, it may be very easy for you to resist this, or it may not be. My kids are both honor students. They're both athletes. My older son, anybody that knows him, I've never met anybody who doesn't like him. He's that kid that doesn't take sides, never hurts anybody's feelings, just a really good kid. It's really hard for a really good kid to resist peer pressure. So we talk a lot about this, and he does have a pact with his friends that this is not something that they're going to do, and they're going to work it out together, which is huge. My sophomore, I never thought there was a silver lining to a child who doesn't care what anybody thinks about him. People either love him or they hate him, and there's no in between. But when it comes to peer pressure, it's really easy for him to say no. All different depending on how your child is. Parents, if your kids if they come up to you and talk to you about this, can't get defensive about it immediately. They're asking you for help. Talk to them about what it is that's so interesting about it, why they would want to use it, if they have used it and want to stop. We're working on a program now. There is no vaping cessation program right now. We've had programs for cigarette smokers before and to help kids quit smoking. That's what I did 18 years ago when I first started. Although it's still a nicotine addiction, the reasons kids start vaping and the reasons kids vape are very different from those that cigarette smokers started using. Cigarette smokers wouldn't be smoking on a bus before a game. They just don't go together. So the cues are very different. So right now we're doing focus groups with kids who are currently vaping to try and figure out what it is that intrigues them, why they use it, when they use it. This way we can have an effective cessation program. But right now we just tell people to use what you know from smoking cessation. Try and change the habit. Get them somebody to talk to. There's so many different places that can handle nicotine addictions. It's a very serious thing. So try and keep an open mind, do research together. So as of October 1st, the state law changed. Right now, all of the state of Connecticut is tobacco 21. So it's illegal for anybody under the age of 21 to buy an e-cigarette, a cigarette, or any form of tobacco. It's also illegal for anyone to sell, give, or deliver an e-cigarette or a tobacco product to anyone under 21. Anybody that is selling them, it's very common for the seniors especially, because this just happened October 1st. So before that it was 18. So our seniors were able to buy these products legally. And then they come to school with a bag of Juul pods and sell them for $5 a pod. I know this is happening because the kids all tell me what happens in school. Now, that's illegal. $300 for the first offense. Every additional subsequent offense goes up to $1,000. Something also very new from October 1st is this new law that prohibits any tobacco or e-cigarette product on school property. So it used to just be during school hours. Now it is any time any school event is happening, whether it's a play, whether it's a football game, and you guys basically have your whole road is tobacco free, the way that you're set up. So any game, any function that's happening that's sponsored by the school, the entire property is tobacco and e-cigarette free, or there's a $75 fine. So, with all of that information, now I can take any questions that you may have from all of that. I know it was a lot, and I tried to get through it nice and fast for you, and I tried to make it a little easier for the kids to understand. Took out a couple of my slides, but does anybody have any questions for me? Yes?
So how do these products come to market? Does it have to go through the FDA or CDC?
No.
They just released it.
So, that's one of the problems right now. Everybody thinks that just because a product is on a shelf in a store, that it's approved by the FDA. That is not the case. And unfortunately, when Trump made his announcement several months ago about dealing with these flavors, back in 2016, the FDA said you have until 2018 to register every flavor, every level of nicotine, every PGVG concentration, every device that you have. It costs a lot of money to register all those things. Nobody ever followed up with them. So they gave them that ultimatum, but then nothing happened. So now they're going to start following up. That's a lot of following up to do, and that's a lot of vape shops that are going to be closed very quickly. The other common thing with the CDC that they found is that every single device was altered. So, the THC users were adding nicotine to it. Okay, now you have brand new chemicals. Some of the THC oil, because it's not legal here, so somebody's making that, and the thicker the oil, the better the oil is supposed to be. So they were adding vitamin E to the oils to make it a thicker consistency. Very dangerous to inhale vitamin E. The vape shops will sell different flavors. People like to mix flavors. You're mixing chemicals, you're creating new chemicals. So, yes, every one of those illnesses, the products were manipulated, but even manipulated in a very honest way is still causing problems.
So I'm gonna hold for the other questions to do the raffle
Yes,
with everybody.